Welcome to Senior High Sunday School for August 27th, 2023. I do not own the rights to this music. Today's Bible basis is coming out of Nehemiah chapter 13, verses 15 through 22. The Bible truth, Sabbath reforms. The title of today's story, Mandatory Bed Rest. Portia got to school early. She really needed to talk to Mrs. Watson, her drama teacher. Mrs. Watson had been out on medical leave. She was supposed to be gone for 6 weeks, but she came back on Friday, 3 weeks ahead of schedule. She couldn't have come back at a better time. Portia was preparing for an audition. It wasn't just any audition, though. This was for a scholarship to the best theater college in the area, which just so happened to be the same school where Mrs. Watson received her degree. Portia knew that Mrs. Watson was the perfect person not only to give a recommendation, but also for advice on the whole audition process. Portia swung open the drama room door with a noticeable amount of flair. She twirled into the room and stopped short when she came face to face with the substitute from last week. "Oops," she giggled. "I was so excited. I came into the wrong room. Good morning, Miss Nicholas. Looks like you're subbing this week too." Miss Nicholas smiled. "You're not in the wrong room. I'm subbing for Mrs. Watson again. She told me you might stop by. Can I help you with something?" Portia cast a confused glance at the sub. Turns out Mrs. Watson came back against her doctor's orders on Friday. She spent the weekend in the hospital. Miss Nicholas said. Portia gasped. Her hand went to her chest. "Don't worry," said Miss Nicholas. "She's fine. The doctor has her on mandatory bed rest now. There's even a nurse with her 24/7 to make sure she doesn't overdo it." Portia sighed. She would just have to figure out an audition piece by herself. Our lesson scripture beginning at Nehemiah chapter 13, verses 15 through 22. "In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves, and lading asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. There dwelt men of Tyre also therein, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah, and in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said unto them, What evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us, and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut, and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath. And some of my servants set I at the gates, that there should no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. So the merchants and sellers of all kind of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice. Then I testified against them, and said unto them, Why lodge ye about the wall? If ye do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time forth came they no more on the Sabbath. And I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves, and that they should come and keep the gates, to sanctify the Sabbath day. Remember me, O my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to the greatness of thy mercy." Nehemiah was well acquainted with the mistakes of his ancestors. In fact, giving the community a chance to make a fresh start is probably one of the reasons he was so passionate about restoring Jerusalem. Unfortunately, he could tell that the people of his day were starting to make the same mistakes their ancestors had. Though his actions may have caused him to be unpopular, he refused to allow them to make the same mistakes. Keeping the Sabbath was so important to the welfare of God's community that Nehemiah ordered the gates shut to prevent the Israelites from breaking this law. People sometimes make demands of those who are breaking community rules. When they do so, they just know that the consequences for breaking the rules are simply not worth it, just as Mrs. Watson's doctor knew that her failure to follow his instructions would not end well. The questions for this story today. Question 1. How would you describe Portia? Use evidence from the story to support your answer. Question 2. Do you think it was appropriate for Mrs. Watson's doctor to have a private nurse with her 24/7? Explain your answer. Question 3. Was Portia correct that she had to find an audition piece on her own? Why or why not? Questions from our lesson scripture. Question 1. What did Nehemiah see people doing on the Sabbath? Question 2. Why was Nehemiah so outraged by what they were doing? And question 3. Nehemiah asked God to remember him and show mercy toward him. Describe what Nehemiah did that could have influenced God to honor that request. Develop an action plan regarding how you can more closely observe the Sabbath. Answer yourself 3 simple questions. What do I need to improve? Number 2, how will I make these improvements? And number 3, when do I plan on reaching this goal? Share your plan with someone. Letting someone else know about your spiritual goals helps you maintain accountability. The memory verse for today's lesson. And I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves and that they should come and keep the gates to sanctify the Sabbath day. Remember me, O my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to the greatness of thy mercy. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 22. The end. God bless you, and thank you for joining me today.